Chase Bennett had a rule. Keep your head down. Do the work. Don't make anyone else's problem your own. He had learned that rule the hard way. 12 years in the Navy, 4 of them as a SEAL, had given him a very clear picture of how the world actually operated when you stripped away the flags and the ceremonies and the handshakes from men who had never once left the continental United States. You did your job. You protected the people beside you. You went places the country needed you to go, and did things the country needed done, and you did not ask for acknowledgement, because acknowledgement was never part of the arrangement. And when you came home, the country that sent you out there did not roll out the welcome mat. It handed you a folder of paperwork, a 15-minute appointment with a case worker who mispronounced your last name, and a phone number for a benefits hotline that kept you on hold for 40 minutes before the line went dead. So Chase Bennett, 35 years old, honorably discharged, 2 Bronze Stars and a commendation he never once mentioned to anyone, was doing exactly what he always did on a Tuesday morning in October. He was keeping his head down. He was walking from the parking garage on Clement Street toward the Department of Labor office, 3 blocks east, where he had a 9 o'clock appointment with a caseworker named Brody Simmons who had already cancelled on him twice before. He had a folder under his arm in discharge papers, his resume, a letter from his former commanding officer that he had been carrying around for 6 weeks now, like a lucky charm that had quietly, without ceremony, stopped working. The morning air was cold enough that his breath came out in small clouds. October in Cincinnati had a particular kind of cold, the kind that found old injuries and settled into them. His right shoulder ached in the specific way it only ached below 40 degrees. He kept his pace steady. His face, neutral. The way he'd learned to look in places where looking bothered was the first and most expensive mistake a man could make. He almost walked past it. Almost. The scene was happening on the wide concrete steps outside the main entrance of the federal building on Clement. A woman in a wheelchair sat near the bottom of the accessible ramp, a canvas bag in her lap, a cane hooked over the armrest. She was old, not old in the fragile sense, not breakable looking, but the kind of old that has accumulated deliberate weight over time. Silver hair pulled back precisely. A navy blue cardigan buttoned all the way to the collar, as if she had dressed herself carefully that morning, layer by layer, checking each one before moving to the next. She was speaking to a security officer. And even from 30 feet away, Chase could read the full shape of the situation without needing a single word of it. The officer was young. Late 20s. His badge said T. Wade. He was standing 2 feet closer to her wheelchair than any legitimate business required, and he was holding something. Chase couldn't see what at first. Then he could. Her ID. He was holding her government-issued identification card at a slight upward angle, not dramatically high, not theater, just precisely high enough that she could not take it back without reaching. And reaching was not something a woman in a wheelchair with visible joint stiffness in both hands was going to do without difficulty. Without the humiliation of that difficulty being visible to every single person watching. 6 people had gathered. Maybe 8. Standing at the comfortable distance of people who have already made their decision, that they are witnesses, not participants. Not one of them had moved. Chase slowed his pace. He could hear the officer's voice now, not words yet, but tone. The tone of a man who has found the specific part of his job he most enjoys, and is currently deep inside it. Then he heard her voice. Steady. Careful. The diction of someone who had been educated to speak in full sentences, and who was using that education right now as the only available weapon. I have a 9:30 appointment. I am simply asking you to return my identification. Wade's voice had a particular laziness in it. I already told you. This card doesn't scan right. Until it scans right, you're not going through. It is a valid federal identification card. I have carried it for 11 years without a single issue. Then maybe it's time to get yourself a new one. The card was issued to me by this government, in this exact condition. I did not damage it. Wade tilted the card slightly, examining it with the theatrical patience of someone who has all the time in the world, and is very aware of the fact. He said. That sounds like a you problem. Someone in the small crowd laughed, short, uncomfortable, and immediately looked at their shoes. The woman in the wheelchair held herself very still. That specific stillness of a person deciding, in real time, whether to accept humiliation or refuse it. And the decision is always harder than it has any right to be. Young man. Her voice held. I am going to ask you one more time to return my identification and allow me to proceed to my appointment. Wade leaned in. Not enough to cross any official line. Enough to make the point. And I am going to tell you, one more time, that you do not get to give me instructions. You want inside, you go get a new ID. You want a new ID, you go to the DMV. The DMV is about 9 blocks that way. He pointed in a direction that was almost certainly not toward the DMV. Chase had stopped walking. He stood there, folder under hase arm, rule in his head, and he looked at this scene with the same calm assessment he had used in places far worse than a federal building sidewalk. He knew the rule. The rule had served him. He knew that nobody was going to thank him for this, and that the world did not reliably reward people who stepped into other people's business. He knew all of that. And he walked up to the bottom step anyway. Excuse me. Wade turned. His face ran through a fast, practiced calculation, and landed on the expression that reassigns authority from one target to a newly arriving one. Sir. Step back. This doesn't involve you. I'm not in your space. Chase kept his hands visible, his voice below the level of confrontation. I just want to understand what's happening here. What's happening here is official business. Keep moving. She says her ID is valid. Is there a supervisor who can verify that? Wade's jaw tightened. Are you a family member? No. Then you have no standing here. Walk away. I'm a member of the public asking a reasonable question. Chase took his phone slowly from his jacket pocket. Not aimed at anyone. Just held. Is a supervisor available, or not? Two things happened in the same second. Someone else in the small crowd raised their phone. And Wade saw both of them, his eyes moving from one to the other and back, and Chase watched the exact moment the math changed behind the officer's eyes. Wade dropped the ID into the woman's lap. Without a word, he turned and walked back through the glass doors. The doors closed. The crowd began to scatter, the way crowds do when the thing they gathered for is suddenly, quietly, over. Chase looked down at the woman in the wheelchair. She was looking back at him, with an expression that had nothing simple in it. Not ordinary gratitude, which usually reads like relief. This was more careful. More deliberate. The look of someone who sees things, files them precisely, and does not waste the filing. Can I help you up the ramp? He asked. I have been managing ramps for 14 years, she said. I do not need help with the ramp. He almost smiled. Fair enough. A brief pause. You may walk alongside me, she said, if you have business in this building and no objection to slowing your pace. I've got time. Her name was Evelyn Harper. She offered that on the way up the ramp, the same way she seemed to do everything, directly, without ceremony. She had an appointment on the 4th floor, she said. Veterans Benefits Office. Not for herself. Her late husband's case had been open for 3 years, passed between desks so many times the original paperwork had been requested, lost, re-requested, and only partially reconstructed. She came in person every few months, she said, to remind someone that the case still existed and that she still existed. Chase said he understood the feeling. She asked about his appointment. He told her. Labor Office. Employment Assistance. The folder. She glanced at it. Then at him, with those careful eyes that moved like they were taking inventory. How long out? She asked. 2 years, he said. She nodded. Not with sympathy. With understanding, which is different, because understanding does not require you to explain what 2 years means. They parted at the elevator. She pressed 4. He pressed 2. Just before the doors closed, she looked at him. Thank you, she said, not as punctuation. As a complete sentence. Carrying its full weight, the doors closed. Brodie Simmons had left a note taped to the office door. Call to another department. Please reschedule using the online portal. The link at the bottom of the note returned an error. Chase sat in the plastic waiting area chair for 20 minutes, just to be certain, then picked up his folder and walked back out into the October cold. He did not know, walking away from that building that morning, that Officer T. Wade had already picked up his phone. The report Wade filed was 3 paragraphs long. Chase would not see it for months. But it existed from that afternoon, formal language describing an aggressive civilian who had interfered with a lawful police interaction, refused repeated instructions to stand down, and created a hostile environment for responding officers. It named Chase specifically. It included his ID number, which Wade had noted from the lobby security camera log. The report was not filed with any criminal intent. It did not lead to charges. It did not need to. It only needed to exist, in the right database, visible to the right people, attaching itself like a quiet shadow to his name every time someone ran a background check on a veteran applicant for a security-adjacent contract. Chase did not know about the report in November, when the defense firm contract he had spent 3 months building toward simply stopped returning his calls. He assumed the work had dried up. He adjusted. He did not know about it in December, when his landlord sent the non-renewal notice. Standard portfolio rebalancing, the letter said. Nothing personal. He packed his things into Gavin's spare room and told himself it was temporary. He did not know about it through January, when he applied for 21 more jobs, received 4 responses, attended 2 interviews that felt like something real, and watched both of them dissolve into silence within a week. But the report was there. Working quietly. Doing exactly what it was designed to do. The first time Chase came close to finding out was in the second week of January. He was sitting in the parking lot of a security firm in Blue Ash, engine idling, waiting to hear back after what he thought had been a strong interview. The hiring manager had shaken his hand twice. Said things like strong fit and exactly what we're looking for. Chase had driven home telling himself not to count it, and had counted it anyway, the way you count things when you have run out of other things to count. The email came 4 hours later. After careful consideration, we have decided to move forward with another candidate. He read it twice. Then he set his phone face down on Gavin's kitchen table and sat there in the stillness of that apartment, the smell of old takeout, the hum of the refrigerator, and had the most honest conversation with himself he'd had in months. He was not broke yet. Not technically. But he could see it from where he was standing, the way you can see a city on the horizon before you've reached it. The prescription for his knee he had not filled in 3 weeks. The oil change his car needed that he kept postponing. The Sunday calls to his mother where he answered "I'm good, Mama," with a precision of delivery that cost him more each week. He picked up the legal pad. Counted the lines. 41 applications. 7 responses. 2 interviews. 0 offers. He put the pen down. He did not quit. That was not something Chase Bennett did. But that evening, sitting on the pull-out couch with the legal pad on his knees and the lamp on the side table throwing a small, tired light, he allowed himself to ask the question he had been refusing to ask for weeks. Had he destroyed his own life by standing at the bottom of that ramp? He did not have an answer. He sat with the question until the lamp started to feel like too much light, turned it off, and stared at the ceiling until morning. He almost missed the signs. The first one came in mid-January. He was leaving a staffing agency in Norwood when he noticed a black SUV parked across the street, engine running, no one going in or out. He noted it the way a trained man notes things, without stopping, without looking directly, filed it, and kept walking. Probably nothing. Cincinnati had black SUVs. The second sign came 10 days later. A phone call from a number he didn't recognize. Cincinnati area code. He answered. Silence for 3 seconds, then a click. He called back. The number had been disconnected. The third sign was the strangest. He was at the Department of Labor, waiting in a line that had not moved in 30 minutes, when the woman at the counter called a name and he heard it, clear, unmistakable, from directly across the room. Marshall Bennett, his father's name. He turned. The counter clerk was looking at a file. She called it again, Marshall Bennett, and an older man in a green coat stood and walked toward her. Not his father. Of course not his father. His father had been dead for 24 years. Chase turned back to the line, his heart doing something irregular in his chest, and told himself it was coincidence. He would think about that moment again, months later, and understand it differently. The call came on a Thursday in February. Chase was at Gavin's kitchen table. The legal pad was open in front of him, 43 lines now, the response column mostly quiet, and his coffee had gone cold without him noticing. His phone rang from a number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail. He answered on the fourth ring. Mr. Bennett. A woman's voice. Composed. Professional. My name is Annalise Corbin. I'm executive assistant to Mrs. Evelyn Harper. Is this Chase Bennett, formerly of the United States Navy? He sat up. Yes. Mrs. Harper would like to meet with you, at your earliest convenience, to discuss a matter of some significance. He said he could do tomorrow. A brief pause. Mrs. Harper was hoping for this afternoon, Annalise said. If your schedule permits. Chase looked at the legal pad. At the cold coffee. At the empty column. I can do this afternoon, he said. The address was in the Millbrook district. Chase had driven through Millbrook without stopping many times, because stopping there cost money he didn't have, and standing at the edge of that particular gap served no purpose. The houses sat far back from the street. The driveways were long enough to require their own names. The trees lining the road were old enough that they had grown into each other overhead, making a tunnel of bare winter branches. He parked on the street. It felt presumptuous to pull into the driveway, and walked up to the front door in the jacket he'd been wearing since October. Clean. Presentable. Not Millbrook presentable. He noted the fact for exactly 1 second and then put it away, because it changed nothing. Annalise met him at the door. She was composed in the way of someone who worked for a person of genuine authority and had calibrated herself accordingly. She walked him through a hallway decorated with a taste that did not announce itself, no excess, just quality, the specific understatement of wealth that has nothing left to prove to anyone. The sitting room at the end of the hall looked out onto a winter garden. Bare trees. Brown grass holding its breath, waiting for spring. Evelyn Harper was already by the window. A cup of tea beside her on a small table. She turned when Chase came in, and looked at him the same way she had outside the federal building. Like she was verifying something she already knew. Checking the original against a copy she had been studying in the interim. Mr. Bennett, she said. Please sit down. She studied him for a moment, without apology, without performance. The frank attention of someone who has learned not to waste it. How have things been, she said, since October? Not quite a question. The shape of one, but the weight of something that already knew part of its own answer. He could have said fine. Fine was the automatic word, the word you said while you arranged the real answer somewhere out of view. He looked at her across the small table between them. Then he gave her the actual version, the contract that disappeared in November. The lease. Gavin's couch. The legal pad with its 43 lines and its very quiet response column. The prescription he filled when the arithmetic allowed. He said it without complaint and without performance, the way you say true things to someone who has earned them. She listened. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. I owe you an apology, she said. He started to deflect. She raised one hand, slightly, and stopped him. Officer Wade filed an incident report the afternoon of that day, she said. Formal language. Aggressive civilian. Interference with lawful police procedure. Your name and ID number attached. She held his eyes. That report has been accessed at least 3 times since October by parties conducting background checks on prospective employees. One of those parties was a defense contracting firm in the 4th quarter of last year. The room went very still. You knew, Chase said. I know now. I did not know in October. Her voice was measured, but something behind it was not. I have spent the past 3 months establishing precisely what that morning cost you. The contract. The lease, less certain, but probable. The interviews that went silent. She paused. Wade filed a lie. And the lie had consequences I did not anticipate, and should have. Chase looked at her for a long moment. You investigated this. I investigated you, she said, without apology for the distinction, but without coldness in it either. Not as surveillance. As all accountability. My own. When someone does what you did on those steps, with nothing to gain from it, and pays for it the way you have paid for it, I take that seriously. What did you find? He said. When you investigated. That you are exactly what you appeared to be. She looked at him steadily. Which, in my experience, is a genuinely uncommon result. He didn't know what to do with that. He let it sit where she had put it. Mrs. Harper, he said. What is it that you do? Something shifted in her expression. The edge of a smile, not there yet, but close. What made you decide to ask that now? This house. Annalise. 3 months of investigation. He paused. In that elevator you seemed like someone standing in line. In this room, you seem like someone who doesn't stand in lines. I should have put that together sooner. The edge became a brief, real smile. My husband, Royce Harper, spent 30 years building a logistics and infrastructure company, she said. When he died, 5 years ago, it passed to me. We operate in 22 states. She said it the way people say things they have made peace with, without pride, without minimization. I have always preferred a quiet life. The wheelchair makes it easier to move through the world without announcement. Which suits me. She sat with the dimensions of that for a moment. Okay, he said. I did not bring you here for sympathy, she said. I brought you here because I have a problem, and I believe you may be the only person I have met who is actually equipped to solve it. She told him about the foundation point. 18 months before Chase walked into her sitting room, Royce had spent the final year of his life building it. The Royce Harper Foundation for Veteran Transition. $28 million. Employment programs, mental health resources, housing assistance, entrepreneurship support, all of it aimed at the gap. Not the gap in policy language. The real gap. The one Chase had been living in for 2 years. The space between service and civilian life that the country built, quietly, and never repaired. 2 executive directors had come and gone. The first was a policy professional, impressive credentials, no service history, who built programs that looked excellent in annual reports and reached fewer people each year. The second was a veteran, a genuinely good man, but without the organizational depth to translate his understanding of the problem into the architecture of a solution. He was overwhelmed in 8 months and left without bitterness. The foundation was currently reaching fewer than 200 veterans per year. With the right person leading it, Evelyn said, I believe that number can be 5,000 within 3 years. Chase looked at her. Why not bring in someone with nonprofit leadership experience? An established track record. I have met 14 people with that track record, she said. All of them knew how to run a foundation. None of them knew what they were building it for. She paused. The gap is not a policy problem, Mr. Bennett. It is a human problem. It requires someone who has lived the specific human experience of being inside it. I have never managed an organization of any size. You led men through conditions most administrators cannot conceptually imagine, she said. You made decisions under pressure where the cost of a mistake was permanent and irreversible. You did it while people trusted you with their lives. She held his gaze. That is more relevant preparation for this work than any credential I have seen on any resume. He looked out the window. At the winter garden. The bare tree. The brown grass. The patience of a thing waiting without certainty, but waiting anyway. There is something else, Evelyn said. He turned back. She reached to the side table and picked up a folder. She set it on the small table between them, carefully, with both hands, the way you set something down that has been waiting a long time to be set down in the right place. Before you open that, she said, I want to tell you something about my husband. Royce Harper had grown up in Louisville. Youngest of 4 boys. His father had served in the Army, Korea, and come home changed in the ways that generation came home changed, which meant changed in ways the family learned to navigate around rather than address, because addressing was not an option the era offered. Royce had grown up with the texture of that navigation as the furniture of his daily life. He never forgot it. It was the invisible engine under everything he built, every hire he made, every dollar he directed, the company and the foundation both. A boy who watched his father carry something home from a war and never once get help setting it down. She paused. Her hands were folded in her lap. In the course of investigating your background, she said, my team found something they were not looking for. Chase waited. Your father? Marshal Elijah Bennett. United States Army. Served 1987 to 1994. The thing that moved in Chase's chest was specific. Immediate. His father had died when he was 11 years old, a heart attack at 41, sudden, nothing anyone had seen coming. The kind of death that closes certain doors before you understand they were open. Chase had grown up shaped by the space it left, the way a tree grows around something that was never removed. My investigator found records from Fort Campbell, Evelyn said. 1991, your father served under a Captain Logan Harper. Chase went very still. Royce's older brother, she said. Her voice shifted, the specific shift of a voice that has carried something for a long time. Logan was killed in action in the spring of 1991. Your father was in his unit. He was one of 3 men who moved toward Logan's position, under active fire, when they did not have to. She paused. He was put in for a formal commendation. The paperwork was approved. And then, during a records transfer that year, it was misfiled. Your father was never notified. He was discharged 3 years later without ever knowing the recognition existed. The Winter Garden was completely still. Royce spent years trying to locate the families of the men who were with Logan when he died, she said quietly. He found 2 of them before he passed. He never found the Bennetts. The records had gaps. The trail ended. She looked at Chase directly. It found you instead. Chase looked at the folder on the table. He thought about his father the way he had always thought about him, in small pieces, because small pieces were what remained. The smell of wood polish. A green canvas army duffel in the hall closet that always had the quiet quality of something important, something not to be carelessly opened. Sunday mornings. The specific silence of a man who had been somewhere and did not talk about it, not because he was hiding it, but because he had no language for it that would have made sense to an 11-year-old boy sitting across a breakfast table. He thought about a formal commendation sitting in a misfiled folder for 30 years. He thought about the way the world folds. How a thread from 1991 travels forward through decades, quietly, without announcement, and touches down in places no one could have planned or predicted. A Tuesday morning in October. A concrete ramp. A man who almost kept walking. Open it, Evelyn said. He opened the folder. The commendation was there. Official. Stamped. His father's name, Marshal Elijah Bennett, in the formal type of documents intended to be permanent. The citation was short and exact and described a man moving toward danger he was not required to move toward, because something in him would not allow him to do otherwise. It described, in the careful language of military record, a man Chase had always known his father to be, in the way you know things about someone through what they leave behind, rather than what they say. He had just never had words for it before. The words had been sitting in a misfiled folder the entire time. Below the commendation was a second document. Harper Foundation Stationery. Dated 3 weeks prior, formal offer. Executive Director, Royce Harper Foundation for Veteran Transition. Full programmatic authority. The mandate to build from 200 veterans served per year to 5,000. Resources. Board support. A role with real reach and a real human problem at the center of it. His name was already at the top of the page. He sat with both documents for a long time. Not performing the weight of it. Actually sitting with it, the way you sit with things that have no shortcuts. He thought about the legal pad on Gavin's kitchen table. 43 lines. The cold coffee. The empty column. All those quiet mornings at 5 a.m., knee aching, ceiling overhead, choosing, day after day, to get up anyway. He thought about what it meant that all 43 of those doors had been silent while this one had been slowly, quietly, opening. Then he set the documents down. I need you to understand something, he said. She waited. If I take this, it is not a transaction. He looked at her directly. It is not me accepting a reward for something I did on those steps. I don't want it framed that way, internally or publicly, ever. He paused. And I need to build this the way veterans actually need it built. Not the way it satisfies a board's idea of what help is supposed to look like. Not the way it reads well in an annual report. The way the people who need it actually need it. Yes, she said. Simply. As if that was the specific answer she had been waiting to hear confirmed out loud. I'll make decisions you may not agree with. I expect so. And when I do, I need to know the foundation stands behind those decisions. Not in principle. In practice. You will have that in writing, she said. Annalise will add the language to the terms today. He looked at her. This woman who had dressed carefully on a cold October morning. Who had held her spine straight on a concrete ramp in front of a crowd that chose not to see her. Who had spent 3 months quietly locating the exact shape of what she owed, and the exact person she wanted to give the chance to. He thought about resistance. About the version of himself that wanted to say no, that felt the offer as charity wearing the costume of respect, that had spent 2 years getting comfortable with the particular dignity of refusal. He thought about 5,000. He thought about his father. I'll need a week to review the full terms, he said. Take 2, she said. There is no urgency beyond getting it right. He stood. She did not move toward a handshake or any formal ceremony of conclusion. They did not need one. What existed between them had been established at the bottom of a ramp for months ago, and had survived for months of distance and silence with its original shape perfectly intact. He was almost to the hallway when she spoke. Mr. Bennett. He turned. The commendation, she said. I had it formally reissued and correctly recorded in your father's permanent service file. It is now an official matter of federal record. She held his eyes, and held them, and did not look away. He should have known while he was alive. He didn't. But his son knows now. And will be able to tell his children, someday, exactly what kind of man their grandfather was. Chase Bennett had developed, over 12 years in places that required a man to remain completely functional in the presence of very large feelings, a reliable mechanism for exactly that. He used it now, fully, with all the expertise of someone who had practiced it in considerably more extreme conditions than a sitting room in the Millbrook district. He nodded once. Thank you, he said. Then he walked back down the long hallway, and out through the front door, and down the driveway to his car on the street. He sat in it for a long time without starting the engine. The neighborhood was quiet around him, the specific quiet of a place where noise happened somewhere else. The legal pad was on the passenger seat. He picked it up and looked at the list. 43 lines. The empty column. For months of mornings. All of it, the couch, the cold coffee, the prescriptions he'd deferred, the Sunday calls where he'd said I'm good, Mama, with a precision of delivery his mother never once suspected, all of it leading here. To a sitting room with a winter garden and 2 documents in a folder and an old woman who dressed carefully before she left the house, and noticed, and remembered, and took her time before she acted. He thought about his father, in a uniform he had only seen in photographs, moving toward something dangerous because something in him would not allow him to do otherwise. He thought about a formal commendation sitting in a misfiled folder for 30 years. Waiting to become words a son could finally carry. He thought about what it means to do the right thing in a moment when no one is watching and nothing about the world around you suggests it will matter. His father had moved toward danger in 1991. Chase had moved toward humiliation in October, and somehow, 30 years apart, on entirely different ground, the same courage had finally been witnessed. Had finally been named. Had finally found its way home. He turned the key. The engine caught. He pulled out onto the street and drove back through Cincinnati, bare trees lining both sides, sky the color of iron in late February, something in his chest sitting open in a way it had not been open in a long time. Not dramatically. Not with any announcement. Just open, the way a room feels when someone unlocks a window that has been sealed for years. 3 weeks later, Chase Bennett walked into the offices of the Royce Harper Foundation for Veteran Transition and sat down in the executive director's chair for the first time. The office had a window. He could see the street below. Ordinary people moving in ordinary directions, carrying, every single one of them, the invisible weight of things no one else could see from the outside. He opened the legal pad to a fresh page. At the top, he wrote one number .5000. Then he put the pen down and started making calls. There is a version of this story that is about money. About a billionaire's gratitude arriving at precisely the right moment, like a rescue from a very expensive direction. That version is not wrong, but it is not the whole truth. The whole truth is simpler and harder to sit with. A man with a folder under his arm and nothing to gain walked up to the bottom of a ramp and stood next to someone who needed him to. That is the entire seed of it. The foundation, the office, the legal pad with its new number at the top, the commendation in a federal record, a father's name restored to the story it had always belonged in, every thread of all of it grew from that one seed. From 30 seconds of a man deciding not to keep walking, not because he calculated an outcome, not because he believed the world would reward him, because he was, in the cleanest, most unperformative sense, the kind of man who cannot walk past certain things. Those men are rarer than we admit, and the world, which does not always remember to recognize them, sometimes does. Sometimes the recognition arrives through 4 months of silence and a cold couch and 43 unreturned calls. Sometimes it comes in the form of a misfiled document from 1991, and an old woman who notices everything and takes her time before she acts. Sometimes the thing you did for a stranger turns out to also be the thing that reaches backward, across 30 years, across everything that was lost and never found, and gives your father the words he was owed, and never received. Chase Bennett understood that now. Not as a belief. Not as comfort. As a simple, lived fact. Keep your head down. Do the work, and when something is wrong, right in front of you, or stand up, the rest has a way of finding you.